Hey, it's the Nazarite, and I'm live, yes, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. Now, obviously, I'm going to be bringing up my old channel quite a bit. The weekly Torah portion thing that I used to do in my old channel will be carrying on to this channel, and I've spoken of different parts of Lech Lecha, this week's Torah portion, over the years, and I noticed something, and maybe it's not maybe I have noticed it in the past. I don't remember. But right, we read about Avram, the different covenants, the trials and tribulations, the great call to adventure, right, in this week's Torah portion, and coming to culminating in the covenant of circumcision in the flesh, right, of the males of the line of Abraham. And so it starts off with the call, right, the divine call when Abraham is quite old by many standards, right? Now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house unto the land that I will show thee. Right? This is the JPS Tanakh version. And so he tells him, go, leave. Abram is 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So Avram got the call, right? As far as the chronological progression, it's that Avram and his father and his brother's son, right, and his woman, they were all going to leave. They left from Ur Kasdim, right, Ur of the Chaldees, I think it's called, and they went to Haran, and they stayed there for a while, and Avram's father died there. And then in this week's Torah portion, it starts off with him in Haran, setting out after answering the call by the divine. In the covenant between the parts, or just before the covenant between the parts, there's a bit where Avram is shown the heavens and all the stars, and God tells him, look, if someone will be able to count the stars, they'll be able to count your progeny, right, your seed. And he tells him that there will be an heir, and he tells him that there will be like the land, right, this idea of a physical place where you will be able to sit and thrive and do your thing. And when he tells him, right, God tells Avram in Genesis 15:7, and he said unto him, right, unto Abram, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, out of Ur Kasdim, to give thee this land to inherit it. But if we read it more closely, right, the text, it's that no, he got the call. Avram was sort of taken out of Haran, practically speaking. The Torah mentions Avram being in Haran on the way to Canaan, right? Avram and his father and his brother's son Lot and all that, right? That whole merry group, they left Ur Kasdim on going already to Canaan. And on the way, they stopped in Haran, and Terach dies, and then it unfolds from there. But they were already on the way to Canaan. They were already answering a kind of call. And then this call that's more unique, more specific to Avram, comes when he is in Haran. So why is it that God tells him, I brought you, not, he doesn't say, I brought thee out of Haran. He says, I brought thee out of Ur Kasdim, Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land. Which means that divine influence, that divine call which they were answering, or which Avram personally was answering, it didn't necessarily begin with this Lech Lecha, which Avram heard in Haran. The divine influence in Avram and the divine revelation manifesting through Avram, the later in this week's Torah portion renamed Avraham with the Hey, significant, Sarai turning into Sarah with the Hey, again, very significant. So it's like, so wait, Avram got the call in Haran, but when God tells him, when God speaks to him here in the covenant between the parts, or right before it, he says, I brought you not out of Haran, I brought you out of that original place. Already back there in Ul Kasdim, there was something calling you. There was something moving you. There was something beckoning you out of there. So even though the Torah doesn't necessarily specifically mention that Avram and God had a relationship before Haran, and that God spoke to Avram before Haran, this is said in the Midrash, a lot of, right, the chronicles of Avram's life, which again, in my old channel, I had a few videos detailing and dealing with the different Midrashim, the teachings having to do with Avram before he set out, before he got the call, before the dialogue that was written down in the Torah took place, there was a whole lifetime, 75 years, with some people saying that Avram became, let's say, cognizant in some way of the Lord at age 3, and some say 30, and some say 33, right? And this is all midrash, external teachings, but it's here to teach us something, meaning that the relationship, that initial engagement between God and Avram was there before Haran. It was already way, way back there. God took Avram not out of Haran. God took Avram and his folk out of Ur Kasdim to give thee this land, he says. And it speaks, I think, to where certain things are written and certain things are, no, I'm not phrasing that right. Let's just say that there are always things going on behind the scenes, as it were, that were not written down in the Torah. This is in part why we have the oral Torah. This is in part why we have the oral traditions, right? The Midrash. It's in part why we have all of these agadot, right? Different myths and legends, things inside and outside of various texts, because there's a lot to learn here and to sort of expand on. Now, some people may say, no, you're going about it the wrong way. It says in the Torah itself, don't add to these teachings or take away from them, right? Of these commandments or take away from them. But these are not precisely commandments. They are ways of thinking of the Torah. And when we see this, right, in Genesis 15:7, and he says, I brought you out of Ur Kasdim, it stands to reason that it would be, I took you out of Haran, because that's what we read. We read that God told Avram to leave his father's house and his kindred, right, and his place, and to go. But it wasn't just Haran, and it wasn't just Ur Kasdim. It was like this thing that was inside of Avram, this divine calling, this divine yearning of Avram to know God to the extent that one can know, to embody, right, that divine revelation. And that is kind of independent of a geographical, physical location. So even if the Torah doesn't specifically mention God speaking to Avram in Ur Kasdim, it was God and Avram, I suppose, right, already working sort of together, getting to know each other, if you will, even before this Torah portion starts with go forth, right, Lech Lecha. All right, let's see if there's a, it's almost sundown, so I'm going to be brief, and I think I'm going to stop unless there's something in the chat. Nope, nothing in the chat. But I have a like, which is nice. Hello, anonymous liker, because nobody's watching right now. But somebody came and left a like and left, so maybe they had to go. Let's see. There's so much more here to talk about, but I simply wanted to bring this verse, right, 15:7. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's independent of a geographical location, I suppose. Maybe certain things are not, but this is, because we read in the Torah right here, right? It was before Haran, right? It was from Ur Kasdim, the Ur of the Chaldees. It was way back when, and it's that place which we need to leave. And I think many times about the verse earlier in Genesis that, right, a man leaves his mother and father and clings to his wife, or cleaves to his woman, and they become one flesh. You need to let certain things go, and you need to leave certain things behind, either in order to find them again down the line, or in order to become a whole person yourself by your own right, by your own merit. There are certain things that you need to let go of, and Avram got that call in this week's Torah portion. You need to let go of that physical place. You need to let go of your father's house and of your kindred. You need to go to where I show you. It's that call that says there's something that you need to figure out on your own. And like I said 2 days ago, it's a kind of leap of faith which Avram just goes for. Now, some say Avram is too agreeable to God's wishes and wills and whims. But Avram is here to show us, or to represent, as a, let's say, a symbol, if not an actual man, this idea of sacrifice. It really comes to fruition, if you will, right, to the full embodiment, if you will, with the binding of Isaac. But even before that, there's a lot of sacrifice going on, and this is one of the first. And here, right, and he gets into famine and the Egyptians and different things. And when he tells him, I'm the one who took you out of Ur Kasdim, the next thing that God said, right, I took you out of Ur Kasdim to give you this land. And he says, and verse 8, and he said, O Lord God, Whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? It's like, how can I know? You're asking me to take this leap of faith. You tell me that it was already in Ul Kasdim. It didn't start here in Haran. You say you, God, just told me you took me out of Ul Kasdim. And so how will I know that what I'm going towards is something that's actually tangible? How do I know that I will inherit it? Whereupon, right, there's the covenant between the parts, and that has a lot there too. And the bottom line for me, reading it over this week, and I may have mentioned this in the past, is that there's a lot of suffering that's going to be involved. It's inescapable. And if it's not you, and it has been, then it's going to be your progeny. It's going to be your seed. Only the fourth generation is going to come back here. There will be a foreign people, a foreign nation that will enslave them and that will work them very, very hard. But they will also receive judgment, and eventually your seed, your people will return here with great inheritance, with great wealth, with severance pay for a few hundred years of slavery and exile. And it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. And it's not even him. When Avram says, how do I know that I will inherit it? He's talking about his kids. He's talking way down the line. And again, it's this idea of sacrifice. Because of what we do here now, we have the potential, the possibility, the option of affecting generations. And it happens here now in the everyday, to each his own, right? With the way that we conduct ourselves. All right, I think I'm going to say goodbye. Let's all have. Oh, hey, Lisa. Hi there. You're here. That's nice. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to say goodbye. Let's have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful Sabbath. There's so much more to say about this week's Torah portion. I don't know if I was making any sense right now, but that verse that calls back to before Haran, it spoke to me today, and so I decided to talk a little bit about that. And I hope I made some sense. And I hope that we will all be able to answer our own unique personal call to awaken our senses, to be able to hear it, to be able to adhere to it, to be able to discern right from wrong on a very personal level, and to know if that call that we are receiving is true or false, because you never know. It's a gamble. It really is a gamble. So may we work and operate in such a way in the world where the chances that we take and the gambles that we right the whatever that we gamble on, may it be, let's say, the absolute good, or the best that we can conceptualize. And as in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says that it takes a lot. It's a very virtuous thing, but it takes a lot to what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, to take a chance on the Tao, this thing that has no name, that has no real essence, that is not at all tangible, and yet it's what surrounds and infiltrates everything that is tangible, everything that is going on. It's this thing which makes everything alive and yet cannot be named. And taking a chance on that, on the source of life, on the creator, on this ineffable thing, on this thing which I cannot articulate in any possible way, it pays dividends down the line. We just, I think, like Avram, need to be open to hear the call and to have the guts to go for it. Even if we're 75, even if we think we're very old, even if we've been living in our father's house, if you will, conceptually, for many, many years, there's always that chance of going out and doing your own thing in the world and having it pay off, right? In truth, in righteousness. God gave Avram a sign. And he says, how do I know that I will inherit it? He said, there will be suffering. There's your sign. Okay. Let's have a good Shabbos, a good weekend. I'll see you, I hope, Monday. God bless.